So you'll notice that everyone is talking about Glen Greenwald today, so I thought we'd have a little discussion about this. So you might remember 4 years ago when Glen Greenwald was forced to resign from The Intercept over editorial freedom because he was writing an article that was critical of Joe Biden, and he accused him of censoring him, and he was driven out of there. And this is a story that's quite emblematic about Greenwald's career, actually. He has been very solid on, frankly, holding power to account, which is the purpose of the Fourth Estate. And Greenwald has been a very reliable voice on that. He himself is obviously ideologically left-wing, but he's been really, really solid and thorough on the fact that actually there is a great amount of power that has been accrued on both sides, and the media themselves were not prepared to interrogate the power that the Democrats had. And so he was essentially kicked out of the left and found himself to be a dissident outside of their spheres, even though ideologically he fits perfectly within them. And you would think, I mean, the old left was concerned about the abuse of state power against the citizenry. Of course, that ship sailed long ago, but Glen wasn't on it. And this has been this has made him a thorn in the side of many of the great and powerful. They don't like him because he actually he actually does what a journalist ought to do and investigates into their malfeasance, and then apparently reports on it honestly, which I think is probably true. Personally, I've actually never been disappointed with his reporting, and I've been following politics for quite a long time now, and I've never seen him act out of character in this way. So you can understand that he's one of those voices that they would like to silence. And so you probably didn't know that Glen Greenwald was did a 2-hour interview with Tucker Carlson today. Now, I haven't had time to actually watch this, but let's have a look at some of the highlights that Tucker has listed for us here. CNN finally admits Joe Biden is in cognitive decline. Interesting. That's something the media lied about for years. How the corporate media rewrites history. Interesting, because Glen, coming out of the corporate media because of their lack of the accountability for the lies that they tell, probably has quite a lot to say on that. Our political tribalism is destroying society, yeah. The two main reasons why the establishment hates Trump, why Trump's opinion on NATO changed Tucker's worldview, who really hacked the DNC. That's an interesting thing. But then you get to, was Jeffrey Epstein working for foreign intelligence? One can only imagine. Bongino and Patel's statements on Epstein, which again, they themselves are interesting things to think about as well, which I won't go into now, but you can see that this is getting quite close to some very sensitive things. The JFK assassination, the corruption of Washington, how traveling gives you perspective, and various other things that I think are probably less sensitive to the current political environment. And normally, when Tucker Carlson puts out a long-form podcast with a lot of people, with an important person, that gets a lot of people's attention. That's what draws their attention. They're very much, oh wow, Tucker is interviewing so-and-so, this is going to be good. And it gets millions and millions of views and dominates the news sphere, dominates the sort of, the political conversation for at least a couple of days, which is an impressive thing to be able to do in this era of very fast-paced media. Instead of talking about this, instead of this being the reason that Glen Greenwald is trending, it is for this video. Now, this video I unfortunately did watch because I didn't know what it was before when it came up on my timeline, is a video of Glen Greenwald engaging in some kind of sexual domination, findom, I think they call it, where he's apparently got drugs in the background, he is licking a black guy and paying him for the privilege, whilst wearing some sort of maid's outfit or something, I don't know. Okay, totally gross. Not a surprise that Glen Greenwald, being a gay man, is into some weird things. Not really something I ever wanted to find out, but also I can't help but feel that it's not a coincidence that on the same day this video comes out and nobody's talking about his Tucker Carlson interview, which I am going to watch after I finish recording this video. And Glen himself has announced has made a statement on this. He says, last night, videos were released online depicting behavior in my private life. Some were distorted, others were not. They were published without my knowledge or consent, and its publication is therefore criminal. Though we do not yet know exactly who was responsible, we are close to knowing, and the motive was a maliciously political one. Well, it's hard to believe that this wasn't politically motivated, given his high-profile appearance on Tucker Carlson's show. It's just impossible to think this is a coincidence, isn't it? He carries on. As for the content of the videos, I have no embarrassment or regret about them. The videos depict consenting adults engaged in intimate actions in their private lives. They all display fully consensual behavior, harming nobody. Obviously, it can be uncomfortable and unpleasant when your private behavior is made public against your will. That's why that's why the behavior is private in the first place. But the only wrongdoing here is the criminal and malicious publication of the videos in an attempt to malign perceived political enemies and advance a political agenda. Others are, of course, free to form their own judgments. As some are prone to do about others' private lives, it won't change my work. I will continue all the many prongs of my journalism and pursue the causes most important to me exactly as before. To be honest with you, this is about as good a statement as he could have put out about this. And I do believe that his journalism will continue, and this doesn't invalidate his body of work up until this point. And so many people were like, well, yeah, good point. What two consenting adults do in the private of their own lives is none of my business. The question, really, and this is the real question, is who is behind the release and why now? And this is true. Again, Truth Seeker here points out, Glen Greenwald has been completely committed to free speech and, moreover, the accountability of power. So this is, in my opinion, an attempt to discredit him. And I don't think that actually we should allow it to discredit him. Whether you hold a good opinion of this or not, well, that really is actually quite ancillary to the journalism that he has done. And it's useful to have someone who actually does do good journalism, especially in the current environment. However, with that said, and like I said, I don't think you should not rely upon Greenwald's journalism in the future. I think you absolutely should. I do want to address this, what two consenting adults do in private is none of my business attitude. Because the thing about this is that this is essentially the liberal get out of jail free card for any weird, degenerate things that you do in your private life. And actually, I'm kind of past it at this point, because there is what it assumes is essentially a person's sexual behavior is not connected to their character. And I'm sorry, but it actually is connected, and it actually is the expression of their character. If they are prepared to do this kind of thing in some settings, well, what are they prepared to do in other settings? Now, I'm not trying to cast aspersions on Glen. I don't know him. I've never spoken to him, and I'm not saying that he is a bad person or anything like that. But the issue of a person having very weird sexual fetishes and engaging in a very degenerate, debauched series of behaviors in private does reflect on their character more broadly. The two things are not divorced from one another, and it does raise questions in other regards. And what this means is merely consenting to something is actually not sufficient to make that thing an unalloyed, at least morally neutral thing, if not in some way good. No, there are other standards, actually, outside of merely two degenerates consenting to do something degenerate. Two disgusting people could consent to do something, so it's not in any way rape. But the concerns about consent are the view that consent is the only thing that morally legitimates something is a fundamental liberal premise, and I just don't agree with it. I think there are things that you can consent to doing that are also wrong to do. And in fact, doing drugs with some black guys and paying him to allow you to lick him, that's not your first day. Like, that's something that you built up to and is a product of a continuous habit. And if the continuous habit brings you to a point like that, well, if you look at the road you're traveling down, it's probably going to make you do weirder and more disgusting things. And actually, maybe indulging in that kind of thing, even if the person you're doing it with agrees with it, actually isn't the direction that someone of good moral character goes down. And this more holistic, well-rounded view of what it is to be a person is, I think, something we really need to think about. Because actually, really, Glenn should be asking, why am I okay with doing that? Just because, what, because you get a sexual thrill out of it? That's not good enough. Just because you get a sexual thrill out of something doesn't mean you should do it, even if you can find someone who agrees to do it with you. Because the thing is, this is the problem about habituation. We act as if a person's desires are actually not within their control. But the thing is, that's not true. You can change the course of your desires by doing some things and not doing others. The more weird stuff you get into, the worse and worse this ends up becoming, and the more and more depraved you end up looking at things you end up wanting to do. And there's no good end to it, actually. It would be better if you were to, I don't know, cultivate a healthy sexual life rather than say, you know what, I'm not ashamed of this. I was happy to do this. I'm just sad the world got to see me consenting to this weird stuff. I just don't agree with this worldview at all. And I think it makes you into something that you otherwise may not have wanted to be. And so, anyway, like I was saying, it's not that Glen Greenwald is, like I said, a necessarily bad person or anything like that. I'm not saying that he is under suspicion in other realms of his life, although it does raise certain questions, doesn't it? And I'm not saying that this in any way invalidates his reporting. It doesn't. His reporting is still sound. And like I said, I still think that it is worth using his reporting when he does it and where he does it, because there's no reason that if he has uncovered factual information that we should use the man to discredit the knowledge. But this, two consenting adults can do anything and it's none of my business. Yeah, that's got to stop, actually. It is your business, because if everyone around you is a massive degenerate, you can hardly say that you're living in a wholesome society, can you?